Welcome back to episode 3 of Judgment Free Zone, where we are going to continue my story in this episode. So we'll just dive right in and again kind of see where it goes and takes me. I have been thinking about the last couple days, like my dad has been coming up again and needing to kind of continue some of that story. One of the memories, because I've been kind of processing a lot around my mom, and then the things around my dad have been popping up, and just a lot of the contradictories that I experienced growing up. I have been releasing with my coach and working through a lot, like the fears that I have. And it made me think about actually when I started going to the group of sex addicts and wives of betrayal in my previous marriage, where I remember my therapist, they had an emotion at each corner of the room. And I can't remember exactly the question that he asked. It was something about which one do you feel like you have? Actually, now that I'm talking about it, it was like there was a couple questions that we would move around to each emotion that we, whatever it was, the question worked with. And I realized that I never really went to fear. I didn't. It's so wild to see the progression of myself, of how much I didn't think that fear was one that I really related to. Like I could see sadness and anger, but fear, I did not connect with. And now I can see how buried fear was, how fear has been so ingrained in me from a very, very young. And now how much, because of fear, I try to control and trying to release that is what I've been ebbing and flow and working through at the current moment for myself. But with that, because of, again, the stories that have been woven through and the beliefs that have been woven through over time around fear, and those memories have come up for me. I remember my mom, so my dad wasn't allowed to be around kids. I know at one point he was out of jail. He was in and out. And at one point he was out. And by the way, see, this is where this goes, as memories come. There was one point that I didn't even know what was going on. So I remember being told that he was in a hospital, and I don't know why. I remember being at the prison and thinking he was sick and sitting across from him. And it feels like a very distant memory, being there and seeing that. Regardless, at one point, that's what I believed. Whether it really happened and they told me that, or it was maybe something I created to protect myself, I'm not really sure. But there is that memory. And I remember, again, that fear being created. My dad, when he was out at one point, he wasn't allowed to be around kids. So he could be around us, I guess. Again, I was a kid myself, so I don't know, and I can't ask those questions to anyone currently. But my dad was out, and I remember being in the car and my mom having us duck, and we'd have to get behind the the back seat and duck because my dad was in the car. And so creating that fear, right? I remember it was I remember my mom telling me that they went to a birthday party once and he wasn't supposed to be there, but she let him go. I mean, there was just so many stories around that my mom has shared with me slowly over the years around my dad that is really, again, it makes me see how much generational things have been passed down, how much the importance to me to always work on myself, again, being that that I really feel the weight of how important it is to break these generational cycles. The things that I've heard about my mom, it's deep. My mom was 45 when she had me. I was born in the backseat of the car. And she swore that she was going to have me the day that she had me, and she went in for a checkup, and they told my mom and my dad that I wasn't going to be born that day. And she was like, nope, she's coming. So sure as shit, I came. And so ambulance pulled up outside of Thunderbird Hospital, and they delivered me. So that's how I was born, in the back seat of a station wagon, solid. And I had the umbilical cord wrapped around my neck. Thankfully, we here, and all is good. But yeah, my mom had me at 45 years old. She's a baby boomer. She was a military brat, traveled around. Her dad was abusive, an alcoholic, lots of trauma. And again, I can have a lot of empathy for my mom, knowing where she came from and what she went through, and then raising kids, again, being in a similar situation where you have trauma and things happen, and then raising kids, they bring it out in you. I tell my clients all the time too, right? You better believe that the things that I'm going through, my triggers, are going to get brought up in this room, because we are mirrors of each other, right? The things that I say are probably going to bring something up for you, but again, that's where we can relate. That's where we can learn to have empathy. That's something that along my healing journey, did not know. I always knew that I could feel deeply for people. I didn't realize that empathy can really be learned for people. And that was cool to also learn, is that empathy, listening, communicating, these are all skills. You have the ability to learn them. So you don't have to have them right now. And that's awesome, because that means that you can learn them and that you can continue on them. So with that, my mom had shared some pretty rough stories that that have been passed down to me as well. She told me a story about how her mom would be having affairs, and she would be outside while they were having an affair. And she was the oldest, and I can't imagine what that must have felt like. I have a brother, and also he's 7 years older than I am. So there's a piece that I kind of am the only child and also have a sibling. But watching my daughter and how, she's my oldest one, and how much there is that piece of I have to take care of it all. They just immediately go into wanting to have that parent role, that type A personality. And so I can imagine seeing my mom in that position too, and how hard that must have been, having younger siblings, that her dad was so abusive physically that he ended up creating brain damage on her brother. And again, knowing that all of those things, so many stories and traumas and situations, shame that got passed down through my mom to me. And even as I say that I have a brother, I also have a sister. She's my half sister, and she's 30 plus years older than I am. My mom had her out of wedlock. She was a babysitter. It's so interesting, the story, that you've heard these kinds of stories where the teenage girl was babysitting and ended up sleeping with the dad and got pregnant. And that's my mom. And so I remember as a kid, so my sister found us when she was 18, and she didn't have the best There are some stories that I've heard that weren't the best for her situation either, which makes me really sad. And we're not close, but we talk every once in a while where we'll catch up. I've been out to see her. She doesn't live here in Arizona, and I've been out to see her before when I'm visiting places, and we say Happy Mother's Day or Merry Christmas and stuff, but the relationship, isn't there. Um, but I remember going out and visiting her. I must have been, I don't know how old I was, maybe fourth grade. I remember my brother going too, and we went out to Minnesota to see her and getting to be in snow and stuff. And I got to go out the following summer with her. They had arranged for me to be able to go out with her, but I was terrified. And again, it's so funny, like thinking about these stories, because I really didn't feel like I related to fear, and then seeing how woven in fear has been in my life, and that control piece of like, whether it was, a lot of it was others controlling me, so that when I left my marriage, or whatever, we ended it, he ended it, whatever story version takes place, the version is like I was so used to being controlled in every situation that learning how to even really trust myself, even though, like, again, that mind trickery of like when we think we have control but like we really don't, is like, it was like this like tug of war, right? And so anyways, so I got to go out there for the summer, and my sister, I remember being really upset because I was so scared all the time. My mom would have me ask to watch. I had to ask to watch anything. So anything over PG, I had to ask my mom because I could get in trouble. And I can see where I've done similar things with my kids. And that fear, my mom, I remember her being so upset at me because my sister went and got me clothes because we were in poverty and didn't have a lot. And my sister bought me all these clothes. But what ended up happening is I was so afraid, like I couldn't even sleep at night. I mean, I slept with my mom for a long time growing up because I was so afraid, that fear of the boogeyman or spirits or whatever it was, because of all of the demons would get me, or that if I didn't, gosh, it's just like, it's hard to stop all of the memories from shooting in and like getting it out fast enough to you before they slip away. I was terrified of so much. And I remember my sister being upset and saying that I used her or something around the fact of like, because I got the clothes. And so that's what I did, is I went out there and got clothes and then went home. And I was a kid. I was just afraid. And my mom controlled me. And so my worth was in my mom. And so I didn't know how to be without her. And I wasn't able to be present because I didn't know how to be. And it's sad. And that's what I took away from that. I remember, similar things with my dad. Like my whole life, my whole world was my mom. My being. I don't know if maybe I was my mom's security blanket. I still don't completely understand like what she was trying to do. She's made comments my whole life about how she knew she was supposed to have me. She prayed to have me, and she knew she was going to have a girl and all of this stuff. And I never like understood, because to me, she didn't want me. Like, to me, she didn't want me and she just did what she felt like God told her to do, so she did it. But there was no love in it. It was because she felt like God told her to. I mean, it was the same thing with my dad. She said that she knew that my dad had feelings for men, that he was attracted to men. And I remember my dad always saying that was like, or my mom saying that my dad said, I don't know if I vaguely recall my dad saying this at times, that, the Bible talks about, like, that was just the thorn in his side. And again, like, there's just so much, like, nobody living for themselves growing up. Nobody was present with themselves because they were always trying to make God happy and do what they felt like God wanted them to do. And so much fear out of that. So my mom knew about all this stuff when she married my dad, and my dad cheated on my mom with men for 20 plus years. And it's wild to me. And I remember my brother getting married. And again, I just so badly wanted to be loved. At that point, chaos also was like, in looking back now, I can see how that like hit for me, of chaos in those moments. Like, I was used to that, right? Like, I was used to it because if my mom got mad, it was like everything got blown up, whether it was like my mom at me, or my mom at my brother, or my brother at my mom. I mean, there was one memory I specifically remember them like throwing potatoes at each other. I couldn't tell you what it was about or what was going on, but I remember that happening. It's just interesting talking about it. I can see all of these patterns that were passed down to me. And I've known that, right? Like, I practice that. I practice stopping the cycles, and I practice taking accountability and initiative for knowing, like, where, as a young adult, I have done things, and knowing, again, like, how important it is to shift them. And what am I going to do now to continue that healing so that my kids don't have that weight on them. My mom, again, the fear, and the mind tricks. Like, my mom would constantly tell me that she wanted me, like, she'd tell me that I could go places, but she needed to know who the parents were and what was going on. But then I would be gone all the time. And again, I was constantly seeking for someone to love me. I mean, parents didn't like me growing up. Which, again, it's just like, it reminds me of that cop situation. None of it like fully made sense to me. It was just constant questioning of who I was, and if I was good, or if I was lovable, or could be accepted. I remember literally until my early 20s where I had a conversation with who I call my cousin. You'll get to hear more about that story because I'm going to have him actually on my podcast, where I finally started kind of like shifting some of my perspectives about God. That I remember, again, like, since I was a young kid laying in bed praying for God to forgive me, and that if I didn't if I didn't remember something to ask him to forgive me for, that he would forgive me for that too. So that way I didn't go to hell. Like, I was so afraid and terrified of sinning and not being forgiven, and that seeped out into my everyday life, whether it was with my mom or teachers or my brother. Like, I constantly felt like I was the problem. I constantly felt like I could not obtain to be good enough, that I truly was just defective, that it was me. I was the problem. And it wasn't for years that I would realize that I was just the scapegoat. That I'm not defective. There's a lot there, in giving myself grace and compassion for that. I can't imagine what it would have been like to raise your sibling, raise a teenager and all of that. And then again, knowing all of the things that you're going through. I mean, those are critical years. I mean, my brother, when I was in his house, I mean, he had to have been, if I was 16, basic math skills, I mean, he had to have been like 23 or 24 raising a teenager. I mean, it's crazy to me that I'm 33 and I have a 13-year-old. Like, that is a lot. It is. Like, that is so much. So much. Because I've decided to go this way with the podcast. Like, there's so many memories that have been coming up. Like, being curious if people are going to want to come on, that are going to be able to be willing to come on and be like, yeah, I did have issues with you. And I hope they do, because again, we were kids, and it's we were going through your stuff. Like, I remember there was a boy specifically that was a really good friend of mine, and I've been thinking about this specifically. It's been a memory that keeps popping up, and I would consider him, like, he was really close. And there was a girl that he liked, and we were at a party, and I knew that ultimately he liked me. And I knew that I could get her to not be with him. And as teenagers do, I for sure ramped up that story. And I know that it hurt him, because I ultimately didn't want to be with him. I just was afraid that she would take him from me. And so I didn't want to share him. And I know that that really hurt him. So I don't know if he'll ever come on, or if he'll ever hear this. And I won't say your name. But I am sorry. I'm sorry that I know that I hurt you. And that wasn't right of me. You are genuinely, or you were at the time, I can't say, because again, I know that people change, but you were a good person, and you cared about me, and you treated me right. And I'm sorry for the way that I treated you. I remember getting into young adulthood and still thinking about him. There were other boys too that I didn't treat well. And I think that that's where it's so interesting to me, because I just wanted to be loved so bad. But again, that's where a lot of my pain was me using sex as a band-aid. When again, we're teenagers, like, we don't know what love really is. And again, like, we're just running off of hormones and doing things we shouldn't be doing, for sure. Definitely I was. But with that guy specifically. I mean, I have so many great memories with so many great memories, some of the best. You know, cliff jumping at Lake Pleasant, and partying, really good, fun memories. It's going to be really fun to get into the high school years and having people come through and getting to talk and divulge into all of those memories and stories and things that were happening. So I guess basically I'll kind of wrap up here today, and because I'm trying to just take it slow. That's like my thing right now is, you know, we can take it slow. We can honor where we're at. There's so much more, right, that will come that's to share. But I say this, it's kind of like in this way, I say this with my clients too. Like, I wish it could be like the Matrix where I just like plug it in and it like downloads and you have all the tools and resources, right? But it's the same thing with my story, right? Like, I can take it slow, we can share, and as things come, it's gonna ebb and flow, and things are gonna move, and we're gonna have twists and turns, and I'm really excited about this. I'm just really excited about where it's going. I'm excited for the potential opportunities. I'm super excited to be sitting down with people and getting to hear their stories too, like where they were during, how our lines intertwine, but they're different. The things that they were going through, the things that they were experiencing is really, really important to me, because everybody's story matters. Your perception matters. Your outlook matters. What you were going through matters. Who you've become matters. I've got a lot of thoughts going on that I want to go journal after this. So I want to thank you for being on this journey with me. I'm very appreciative. I'm excited to see where this goes and where this continues to go. So thank you so much. Our next episode should be my first guest on this journey. So we'll see how it plays out. I might do like some more storytelling in between. For sure, more of my story will continue to unfold, right? But that for sure is going to be my next episode, will be with my first guest. So I can't wait to see you then, and keep showing up, because I will too.